Chillster. One man hands detector. What's up? What's up? Let me fix the chat a bit. There we go. That should be better. Just gonna set up the table first, and then we'll get started on. What's up, David Banner? Let me see. Let me turn the camera around. Ooh. That way you guys don't have to be looking at me the whole time. There we go. What's up, Dr. Lay? I'm at UCR. Yeah. UCR, same as always. Yeah, this is gonna be a regular spot for me. I mean, it's been, but I'm gonna continue to be a regular here. Yeah, I'm gonna post up right here outside before entering into the center of the campus. I thought there would be more shade though, so dang. It's supposed to get warm today, so we'll see. What you cooking? Yeah, I'm assuming because of the summer classes are smaller than normal classes, it's gonna be less busy than usual. Less busier than usual. But I still see students walking around, so it should still be good. And as you guys can see from the title of the video, oh yeah, this truck's passing by is gonna make a lot of noise. Oh, just wait. Okay. As you guys can see from the title of the video, I'll be addressing some points in regards to the motionless or the Earth's constant motion, right? Some points have been brought up to me, and obviously Dell has been addressing a lot of points as well. So I'll be going over a couple videos if I have time, but most likely I will. But we'll wait till this guy finishes. I'm gonna sit up right there. So I mean, I could sit up here on the side as well. Let's just go to the sun. Alright, so let's just set up right here. Alright, just gonna set up real quick. to the shade. So this is what it looks like, guys. What's up, Lev? Ian? Alright. Alright. Just gotta set up the action camera and we should be good. It's like a slight slant, but it should be fine. How's my water? Oh yeah, there's some people behind me. So if they're there for the first conversation, they're gonna definitely hear what it's about. I mean, if they stick long enough, they'll, eventually find out what it's about. Alright, see if I could get a conversation in like in the first 5-10 minutes. If not, we'll get to the topic of the conversation. What's up, Martin Haley? Base Truther, what's up? Yeah, I got my flyers from, I ordered them from printrunner.com. Yeah, Printrunner. I think that's the website. Yeah, so I made my flyer on Microsoft Point. And basically got the PDF, and then yeah, when you go to any website to print flyers, you can upload your own PDF or you can create one in their own software. But since I already had mine, I just uploaded it, or I send it to them, basically you upload it. And yeah, pretty easy. Yeah, so it's, are you smarter than a 5th grader? For those of you who didn't see it when I showed it. That's the question today. I would assume that there's gonna be a lot of freshmen, right? You would call it first year, straight out of high school, in the summer, you would expect that. Yeah. Kinda don't like that the phone's at a slant. Let me see if I can fix that. Is that good right there? I think that's good. Should be fine. I guess we'll get started. So, is the Earth motionless or in constant motion, right? That's like the question right now that everybody seems to be getting stumped about, right? So, I don't even know how to start, to be honest. I try to prepare for this, try to present. I'll be going up a couple videos and stuff like that, but there's a lot of phenomena that we observe, density, buoyancy, and that we observe objects moving, accelerating or decelerating, whatever. There's motion that's being observed. Now, matter doesn't have the ability to move on its own. That's obvious. Everybody knows that matter doesn't have the ability to move on its own. There needs to be a force to move inanimate objects. So the claim is there a force pushing everything down, or is that force pushing everything, it's an upwards push? What cannot be denied is that there's a directional vector. That directional vector is always there, and when water levels, levels, the levelness of the water is always perpendicular to the vector, right? That's a fact. You know, globe earthers, stationary earthers, and even motion earthers, doesn't matter what it is, there's a vector, and water is always perpendicular. It always levels out perpendicular to the vector, right? That's a fact. So there is, you know, people have a couple of questions, you know, that they have towards the motion of the earth, basically trying to debunk, trying to say, oh, well, how does this work? You know, how do, you know, people have different questions, so we'll be going over a couple of them. So we'll start off with Dell's video that he did a couple of days ago or so. So the video speaks for itself, and I'll just go ahead and play it. It's about 9 minutes, so let that truck pass. And then if anybody has any questions, we can address them, you know, and if not, we could just move forward. Okay, so let me see if this plays. Okay, it is playing.
Here is my demonstration of, regardless of the density and dropping items in tubes of water or half full of water or that, here's how I know the earth is not rising, okay? The argument is, if I take this bottle of water and let it go, the argument going on is that it's just stationary. It's neutrally buoyant. We've all seen the videos of those neutrally buoyant balloons. Okay? And that's all these water tube experiments are proving, is neutral buoyancy. Well, we've known that existed for quite some time now. Okay? But if the earth was rising, it then would not matter how far I dropped this water bottle from. It would always act the same, because the earth would have to be rising at a constant rate. So, that's how I know the earth is not rising, okay? Because the bottle would act the same whether I dropped it from that height or from this height. And it doesn't act the same. The higher I drop it from, the more damage. If the earth were actually rising, and no matter where I let go of this bottle from, the earth would be impacting it at the same rate, and therefore it would act the same regardless of the height I dropped it from. Thanks. Have a great day.
So real quick, his point to why the earth cannot be in motion, I'm gonna try to simplify it, is that in order for the earth to be in motion, it would have to be in constant motion, right? Which that's the claim, because everything has a constant weight. What he's saying is, the higher I drop this bottle, the more it accelerates, or seems to accelerate. Therefore, if the earth is in motion, it would have to be accelerating, but we know it's not accelerating, therefore the earth's not in motion. So basically that's what he's saying, because there's an acceleration motion that the earth cannot be in constant motion. Or, you know, acceleration, I say that because, you know, we know that they're decelerating, but that's supposedly the claim that he's trying to use to disprove that the earth is in motion, you know. But, you know, Del will explain it further, you know, and we could talk about it after. So.
Okay, so hopefully I've I managed to get the recording of Daniel Pratt's video. This is just a little response. Firstly, I just want to say thanks, Daniel. It's good that people are thinking about stuff. And it gives the opportunity to have the discussion, because at the end of the day, that's all that it can be. So we've seen your little video there, and you know, you're talking about the bottle, and if you let it go from there, then there's a little impact. If I let it go from here, there's a bigger impact. So therefore, you say the earth would have to be accelerating, yada yada. Well, here's the thing, Daniel, in this postulation, the way I'm considering it right now, it's the total opposite. So here, if we have a reference frame, right, we'll call this the Earth, right, just for the sake of it. And we have an object attached to Earth, right, and it's moving, right. Maybe not the best thing because it's going to slide off, right. Well, let's try something else. We'll use that. So we've got an object that's attached to Earth, and Earth's moving, right. Now the Earth's moving at its set rate, constant velocity, say, which would be we'll say if we're talking say 1,000 miles per hour. So the Earth and this thing that's attached to it's moving 1,000 miles an hour. As soon as that's no longer attached to that, right, it's going to start a process of decelerating. It's going to get slower, right? And if it's not too far away from the surface of the moving reference frame, then as it comes off, there's a slight impact, right? Slight impact, because it's not had a chance to decelerate, right? It's still moving relatively, quickly in regards to the reference frame. It's not going to lose that much of its speed, right? I mean, these things are just basic physics.
In other words, they kind of have, the stationary earthers kind of have to straw man people that claim the earth is in motion by saying that objects, when they're in motion with the earth, as soon as you let them go, they will automatically go from the motion to no motion, like automatically in less than a second. As soon as you let it go, that's what's supposed to supposedly happen. It's just going to lose its momentum in an instant. But that's not what happens in reality. Things need time to accelerate and things need time to decelerate. You can't just skip through the deceleration and acceleration part. But they're trying to skip over that and say that, oh, look, it should just be constant, but when I let it go, it goes faster when I drop it from higher. That doesn't really make sense. They're straw manning. They're making the claim that we're saying that it should just be stationary as soon as you let it go. And no, there needs to be time to decelerate. Just like anything that accelerates needs time to accelerate. Now the rate in which things accelerate, that depends on the force, how much force you're applying, or how much, when you take away the force. Same thing.
I'm now standing up here. Again, we're looking at this as if we're vertical. Now if I'm standing up here and I'm holding this out here and I let it go, right? Then it's going to start this deceleration process. It's going to get slower and slower and slower, and the Earth would come up and hit it harder, right? Because it's got a bigger gap, there's more time for it to decelerate. If it's out here, and it's just going the same rate, right? Like if I had a craft that was moving at the same rate, then that's what would happen. But when I step over here or I drop something over this, it begins a process of decelerating as this moves continually at its same speed. So as it's getting slower and slower, this is just going to come up and hit it with more impact. If you were witnessing that, it would give you the impression that this thing was getting faster and faster and faster. The reality would be that would be getting slower. And
we cannot exit the reference frame to prove anything is in motion, so I'm going with my senses. I do not feel movement. Well, if you're going with your senses, you feel your own weight. When you're in free fall, you feel that pressure is gone, and that's where you get that nasty feeling in your stomach when you're in free fall, because we're always on Earth. We're always in contact with the pressure of the Earth. So our organs, everything already got used to that. So it kind of, so when you take that pressure away, your body, it just feels weird. There's not that pressure that's keeping it, where it should, I guess, where it's always been, is no longer there. Therefore, when you're in free fall, you feel that nasty feeling in your stomach. It's because your intestines, your internals don't have that pressure, that resistance anymore, and that's why you get that nasty feeling. So, and then when you're back on Earth, that feeling goes away because, we're feeling our own weight now. We're feeling the pressure. So to say that you don't feel the motion inside the reference frame or any motion, doesn't make any sense. Then we wouldn't have weight if there wasn't any motion. That simple.
Reference frame moving at its constant velocity, it would appear to you that that's the thing that's getting faster, when the reality would be that that's getting slower. That's physics, that's what happens. But it's now no longer attached to a power source giving it its motion, right? It's going to lose its momentum. So if the Earth was in uniform motion here, and I let it go, deceleration is very minimal impact. So let it go from up here, more time to decelerate, more impact. Now you would get maximum impact when that object reaches zero terminal velocity, and the reference frame was at the...
I think someone's gonna come up to the table. We'll come back to this. What's up?
I think I'm smarter than a fifth grader.
You think you're smarter than a fifth grader? Right, that's good, man. So these questions have to do with common sense.
Okay.
Very easy. So I have 3, and then see if you could get 2 of 3 at least, right?
What is this for? For like TikTok?
Just kind of, it's for YouTube. I can give you the channel after if you're interested. Yeah, definitely. So I have 2 images here, and the reason I call them images is because one of them is a photograph and one of them is a painting. Okay. So when I see them, people could tell the difference.
This one's for sure the painting.
Okay. It's actually a trick question. They're both paintings. Yeah. So
Oh wait, what was the question?
one of them's a photograph and one of them's a painting.
One of them's photograph and one of them's a painting.
And one of them's a painting.
But they're both paintings.
But they're both paintings, so they're not photographs.
But a photograph is different than a painting. Right?
Yeah, because a photograph will be some, a snapshot of you, for example.
Okay.
A painting will be like, I didn't take a snapshot. I just painted you.
So you tricked me, like.
Exactly. So this is actually a trick question. So the reason I ask people this question is because obviously, we can't tell the difference. Somebody's really good at painting between a picture and a painting. So the two reasons I ask this question have to do with common sense. And the first reason is just believing someone opens the door to being deceived, right? Because you believe me that one's a photograph, that influenced your choice, right? Okay. So the second reason, if you don't believe me, eventually the photographs will trick you, because if you want to determine something is real, an image is not good enough. Because if I showed you an image of me flying or me carrying an elephant, would you believe I could do those things?
That is true.
Right, because my point is, if an image defies physics as well, we gotta throw that image away. And we gotta go with what we know, how physics behaves, for example. You know what I'm saying? So the next two
It's also behavioral too, right? Like, say for example, I'm coming from campus.
Okay.
Right. I see a guy here showing me two things.
Okay.
I would think like, oh, like this. I would take the benefit of the doubt, like, oh. It's
most people will assume that people wouldn't lie.
Yeah, but say for example, I was like in the substation in like New York, whatever. And this guy showed me this. I'm like, I don't believe any of them.
Right, okay, fair enough. But what I'm saying is physics doesn't lie to us. We could test physics. That's what that scientific method is. It's natural science, right? We can test things to be true. So, for example, the next two have to do with water. Okay. The physics of water, for example. Could we agree, water needs to be contained, right? Yep. And once contained, water always seeks the lowest point. In other words, it always goes down. It doesn't matter what orientation the water bottle is, water always shows us the direction of down. That's, and it always levels out. Okay. So, since we understand that fact about water, that it always shows us down, I took two pictures, one like this and then one upside down with water in it. And I painted the water blue with food coloring just to make it easier to see. But since we understand that water always goes down, shows us where down is, I'm showing you these two images. Which one is upside down?
That's a good question. You know why? Because I don't believe you. I don't know if you put something here.
No.
But if I was to,
if I was
to be rational,
rational, exactly. Which one's upside down, based on how we understand water to behave? If water always goes down, I'm showing you these. Which one is upside down?
I would say this one.
You would think this image is upside down?
Yeah.
Why so?
Because you can inverse an image, right? Say if you take
No, but I'm talking about how I was holding it in reality when I took the picture. Because water is always going to show us the direction of down. I'll tell you which one was upside down. This one. I took it like that. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I can never get the water to stick to the top. Again, water is always going to show us the orientation of down. So if I took a picture like this and I showed you the picture like this, the water's going to show like it was sticking to the side. Yeah. But in reality, I took it like that.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So water's always going to show us the direction of down. Does that make sense to you? Or right?
That's true.
Pretty obvious. So the next one is even easier. So if, this one was a little confusing for you. This one's even. Water always finds its level, right? Okay. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
What could be another word for level, for example? What's another word? Equilibrium. Horizontal will be the proper definition, because we could have a straight line, but if it's at a slope, it's not level. It has to be a horizontal straight line. That's what level means. That's obvious. And water always finds its level. That's a fact. So since we understand that water always finds its level, out of these two, which one represents level as we know it? How we, when we're looking at the water. There you go. Yeah, it's the obvious answer. Let me wait for the truck to pass. So, the real reason I do this is because over 95% of the population, including myself and maybe you, have been tricked to believing this is what level means, even though we know it's this. And water shows us that every time.
I thought of a pool instantly.
Yeah, exactly. A lake. A lake. The water always finds its level. So, for example, you want to know how we were tricked, or the majority of people were tricked? Yeah. Do you believe the Earth is a ball?
I think the Earth is like a sphere, right?
A sphere, exactly. That's what you believe, right? So NASA in specific, they claim to have satellites orbiting the Earth, so they need to know the radius of orbit. So they need to know the radius of the Earth if they're supposedly going around. So they do tell us the radius of the Earth is 3,959 miles. So based on the radius, we get the curvature formula, and we get 8 inches per mile squared, which means it has to be curvature every mile. So the first mile is 8 inches, second mile 32, and by the third mile it should be 6 feet.
There's so many physics laws that have to do
with
the radius.
This is
Yeah.
This is a theory, but
Okay.
when we put this theory to the test and we go and physically measure for this curvature, the laws of the physics of water is going to show us that the water is actually not bending. You know, reality is going to show us that the surface of water doesn't bend if we actually went out and measure it. So this will be the number one experiment to debunk the globe of physical measurement of the Earth.
Okay.
So if I was to ask you, what's the number one proof that makes you believe that the Earth is a ball?
I would say this. Oh wait, what's the number one proof?
That makes you believe that the Earth is a ball.
Honestly, I would probably have to say something like how it orbits the Earth, right? Like if
So-
it was like flat. It
What
wouldn't-
orbits the Earth?
The Earth orbits the sun.
Oh, so because because the movement of the sun,
Yeah.
you think that the Earth is moving instead?
No, because how the Earth evolves around the sun.
Well, that's because that's what we were told. We can clearly observe that the sun appears to move in the sky, right?
Yeah.
But we're told that the sun is stationary, and
Exactly.
so. If I was to ask you, do you have any scientific experiment or something that could be tested that could prove that that's the case, that we're moving instead of the sun, or is it just something you were told and you
no,
just believe?
it's like Newton's second law of gravity, right?
Actually, I don't know if you knew, there's actually two theories to gravity. There's Newton's theory of gravity, which is mass attracting mass, and then there's Einsteinian theory of gravity, which debunked Newton's theory of gravity, which has to do with warping and bending of space-time. So they don't say that mass attracts mass anymore. They're saying that mass warps space and time, and then creates gravity. Basically, that's what gravity. So they're changing up the definition of what that is. So orbits and all that, anything that has to do about the sky and outside of the reference frame, which I will call Earth, is all made up. So it's just theories, just like a religion. A religion will try to tell you that the heavens are above and the lights are so and so and blah blah blah. That's what the heliocentric model does. They try to tell us what's above and blah 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 blah. The reality is nobody knows what's above. That's the fact. So anybody making claims about what the stars are and how far they are and what they actually are is just a religion.
So I have a question for you now.
Yeah, definitely.
So like now is like your like your purpose of this to like debunk religions?
To debunk religions, and the heliocentric model being the number one religion, the biggest religion.
Okay. I mean, like as a religious individual, like there's definitely two ways you can kind of like approach this, right?
Okay.
Like there's all like I'm not the most educated in the religion, right? I'm just like I only know so much. But they also like.
But you follow it, right?
I follow it. So for every one thing that you're saying in the religion, it can counteract it, right?
Yeah, there's an explanation.
Yeah,
Explanations are not proof.
Yeah, and that's like what like there's always going to be there, right?
Yeah,
But at the other angle, like you can have to like analyze it like as like an individual or as like a human, right? Like okay, like what am I living for if I don't think there's not going to be a heaven in the sky? And why am I like donating charity instead of stealing charity if there's not that hell on the ground? You know what I mean?
Okay. I would say I would do good deeds just because it makes me feel good to do good. I wouldn't do them just to avoid hell.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If I'm not gonna do them just because I don't want to go to hell. I'm gonna do them because it makes me feel good and to help others.
But it also becomes like a lot more.
I don't have
like,
to follow
specific.
a book.
Okay, like for example, like I'm Muslim, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would I fast one whole month?
Well, that's your choice, I would say.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying like as like my perspective, right? Why would I fast one to please God, right? Like I'm submitting myself.
But I would ask, how did God tell you He wanted you to fast for a month? Did you just read that you just read it from a book, man? You're just taking someone else's word.
Yeah. Okay, and that's what goes back to the first argument, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, I respect it. I like the questions.
I stick with physics when it comes to establishing what Earth is and what this reality actually is and what our place is in it. I will go with physics and understanding how this reality functions, instead of just believing a book. If I want to understand my reality, I will go with physics, with natural science. I would say religion, or especially the heliocentric model, they have to do with concepts and all that, which has to do with formal science. So it's not natural science.
In my perspective, I would rather go with what God says and what religion says, rather than trying to like come to these like abstract conclusions to myself.
Exactly, that's what physics. Physics is speaking through us through physics. I mean, God is speaking through us through physics. Understanding how this creation works. That's how we're gonna get a better understanding of what this place is.
Okay. I mean, like
so
he
doesn't speak. My point is he doesn't speak in language. He speaks, I would say, through the physics. And the creation.
Cool.
Well, I hope appreciate it.
Somewhat smarter than first grade. What's your YouTube? I want to see.
Oh yeah. There you go. Thanks for reminding me.
Do you have like a lot of followers? Or?
I just started this about a year ago. And one of the reasons I'm actually started doing this is because in 2016 I came across this, but they started censoring like in 2019 and 2018.
Oh, okay.
So what they're doing is, you could just take this, I have a bunch of them.
Okay.
So my channel is the first one on there, Level-Headed William and that. And so they're censoring this by misrepresenting people like me and calling us flat earthers and basically just grouping people and then just dismissing their arguments, right? Or you know, but that's why I'm doing this, just to show a method of approach.
Yeah.
And to start the
I mean,
conversation.
you came to like educated place. Like not everyone's gonna agree.
You know, I can't think of a better place to take this to, if you ask me.
Cool. Cool. All right, man.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right. Alright, put some of this away. Yeah, the upside down question, to be honest, I've been trying to think of many different ways to try to simplify the upside down question. And it's like, most people get it, you know, most people do get it, you know, because it's self-evident, but a lot of people have struggles with understanding the up and down, and I don't know if it has to do with the trick question first. Maybe next time I'll try it without the trick question and see if people get it right away, you know. That way, you know, maybe it's the initial trick question that throws people a little off, but we'll see. I don't know. I've been trying, you know, think of different ways to simplify that question. You know, it's, you know, using the word orientation, you know, instead of upside down. You know, I don't know. It's just, I haven't came up with a good way to present the second question so that it's like self-evident even more, I guess, because to me it's self-evident as it is, but yeah. All right, let me see. Let's finish off Dell's video. Let's see if hopefully it's where it left off. Oh man, I'm gonna have to forward it by hand. I don't even know how to do that. Okay, there we go. I should have checked the time.
Here's my
moves continually at the same speed.
Right, we'll go
So as that's getting slower and slower, this is just going to come up and hit it with more impact. If you were witnessing that, it would give you the impression that this thing was getting faster and faster and faster. The reality would be that that would be getting slower. And the reference frame moving at its constant velocity, it would appear to you that that's the thing that's getting faster, when the reality would be that that's getting slower. That's physics, that's what happens. When it's no longer attached to a power source giving it its motion, right, it's going to lose its momentum. So if the Earth was in uniform motion here, and I let it go, deceleration is very minimal impact. So let it go from up here, more time to decelerate, more impact. Now you would get maximum impact when that object reaches zero terminal velocity, and the reference frame was at its full speed. So other examples of that, again, you know, showing it laterally, people understand from maybe driving cars and stuff. So if you've got, you know, one vehicle or another vehicle and you're racing and you're both doing the same speed, right? So we'll call this one Earth. Right, so we'll say that we're bumper to tail, right? And this car's called Earth and this car's called Object, right? And they were both moving. Let's say this one doesn't have any power, right? And they're both moving at 100 miles an hour. This one's pushing this one at 100 miles an hour. If I then put power to this one and I accelerate it, say 102 miles an hour for a period of time, and then I get back to 100 miles an hour, I've now created a gap, right? Now if I then decelerate this one from this distance, the impact's going to be minimal, right? If I'm further away, so say this is pushing this at 100 miles an hour, then we put power to this, we take it to 105 miles an hour for a longer period of time, then we bring it back to 100 miles an hour, then we're going to have a gap like that, a bigger gap. Now if I switch the power off of this, it's going to start losing momentum, and this one's going to continue its 100 miles an hour, while this one, the longer the gap it has, the more time this has to decelerate, right? So if I had enough space, and this was doing 100 miles an hour, this was doing 100 miles an hour, I had enough space for that to decelerate to zero, that being no miles per hour, and that going 100 miles an hour, maximum impact, right? So in that scenario we can comprehend it, that's the mechanics of motion, that's how things operate, right? Let's try that again now, you know, just we can invert it any direction. So let's now say, how do we work this out now, that this is stationary, and this is stationary, right? We're just going to assume that's stationary. Then I come along and I apply pressure and I take that up to there and I let it go, right? You have to assert that this thing now accelerates towards the Earth. How does that work? How does that work? These two are connected on your state.
That's another point about this, that people are trying to debunk the earth having motion, which I think it's great. A lot of people became flat earthers trying to debunk flat earth. The irony, right? Which is good, because that means you're gonna start thinking about it now. You're gonna start to, if you're gonna try to debunk it, you have to do it rationally. You can't just debunk something by saying words, right? Which is ironic, because the people that are trying to debunk the motionless earth are just trying to do it with words. But yeah, it's a good thing that people are questioning, the motion of the earth, because now that opens people, more to start thinking about it and try to debunk it, practically. My question is, or my thing is, where are all the people trying to debunk the motionless earth? Because the same logic applies to both. If you want something to be 100% true, or not 100%, but you want to be sure about something and understand something, if you want to understand something, why not understand the motionless earth? And in other words, try to find explanations practically that would explain why the earth is motion, how the earth is, and how we are achieving all of these effects of density and buoyancy, things falling and rising, and the acceleration motion and all. And another quick thing about, if objects accelerate down and it's mass that's causing it, shouldn't heavier mass objects fall faster than lighter mass objects? Just like, it's a helium eventually rises because of its mass, So that we don't observe that, especially in a vacuum. Everything falls at the same rate. Falls, I would say they decelerate, but yeah, I would just say, just like we're trying to debunk, a lot of people are trying to debunk the motion of the earth. We also have to be questioning the motionless earth as well. Which honestly, I had, before Dale brought it to to most people's attention, there was none, if any, speaking about the motionless earth and how it couldn't work, with all the phenomenon that we observe. Basically, the motionless earth wouldn't work with all the phenomenon we're observing, basically.
Stationary earth. Everything's stationary apparently, and I now apply force to take that to a height, and I let it go, and you say it accelerates and comes down and crashes into the earth. And the higher I take it, the more time it has to accelerate, so it's getting faster and faster and faster, maximum impact.
Nah, people don't believe in gravity. Like if you're postulating, Boomy, that gravity is a pulling force, that's cartoon physics. That's not demonstrable. You can't recreate that. Magic pulling forces, invisible forces don't exist. Force is something pressing against something else. That's what creates pressure. That's what creates weight. Something has to be pressing on something else. That's a force. A pulling force. The gravity tries to invert the pushing force of the earth into a pulling force. So that's all gravity did. It just inverted it.
So what makes it get faster?
But
how does
gravity as a pulling force doesn't exist. Gravity as a pushing force, if you want to call it that, if you want to call it gravity, I wouldn't call it gravity, but it's a pushing force.
How mechanically, in the rational, mechanical, real world, how do you make that thing which you're saying stationary? And I take it to here now I'm stationary, so I'm on a ladder. Right, that's connected to your stationary, so everything's stationary, and I'm holding it there and it's stationary, and I let it go. What are you saying makes it go like that and hit the earth? Because you need something. You require something. Right? What I'm saying to you is demonstrable. You can comprehend this. You've driven a car. If you're behind a car doing 70 miles an hour and you've got a tiny gap, and that car's doing 70 miles an hour and that one takes...
So basically the question is, because in order for objects to have motion and acceleration, something needs to be pressing on it. That's what creates motion. So the question is, if people are claiming that objects are accelerating down, the question is, what's the force pushing objects down? What's creating that force? An explanation would be like, oh, there's molecules, very small molecules that thrust everything, that are calibrated, that thrust everything towards the ground. So it's basically calibrated into all matter, to go towards the ground. It's already programmed that way. That would be an explanation. But then, you know, there's not even an explanation. They automatically jump ahead of the force. They avoid the force. People that claim the Earth is stationary are avoiding that there's a force to cause all the motion that we're seeing, and they're saying that the effects we're seeing now is a cause of itself in a way that doesn't make any sense, but that's the claim basically. So the force is the density of an object and the buoyancy of an object. But if you define density and buoyancy, density simply means more mass per square inch than the area, than the medium that surrounds it. That's literally what density means. More mass per square inch than the medium that surrounds it. And buoyancy would be less mass per square inch than the medium that surrounds it. That just is just talking about how much matter per square inch. And the more matter per square inch, the more dense. The less matter per square inch, the less dense. So, or, you know, it will become buoyant, you know, when you add a force. Again, buoyancy is an effect of a force. You know, that's evident. You know, buoyancy is an effect of a force. So to say that buoyancy creates itself and pushes itself up while dense objects push themselves down, that doesn't make any sense. You know, they will have to be doing it on their own, you know, on their own will, basically. You know, and we know objects don't move on their own. Inanimate objects, you know, require a force, an external force to move them. So
his foot off the accelerator and goes to 69 miles an hour, you're going to bump into it very slightly. It's decelerated enough for you to give it a slight nudge. If he's half a mile up the road and he lets off and comes to a rolling halt and you're still going your trajectory, wallop, you're going to smash into it and cause maximum damage, maximum impact. This can be understood very simply. And again, I can only thank you for making the video and encourage other people to continue making videos and asking these questions, because, as I say, you know, with this stuff, it can be demonstrated, it can be comprehended, but stationary objects and other stationary objects magically accelerating.
David Banner, so when a skydiver jumps out of a plane, he doesn't go anywhere and the ground rises to him. Does he or not accelerate to terminal velocity? So basically, terminal velocity, I mean, Dell has explained it many times. Pretty good. I couldn't explain it better, but I'll try to explain it, you know, my way. Is objects are not accelerating, they're decelerating down. So when you jump off a, when you jump off, you know, a skydiver jumps off a plane, you're losing momentum, you know, and it takes time to lose that momentum. You're not going to lose momentum in a second, you know, from going the speed of the earth or whatever the speed that is to zero. You know, that's why there's a deceleration process in between. And yeah, you could say the earth is rising towards you, but you're losing momentum. So you're still rising as well, but rising slower. And that's why the floor appears to, you know, catch up to you. So that's what's happening. The floor's catching up to you. You're still in motion when you jump off of a plane, but you're decelerating now. So you're still in motion with the earth, but the earth's catching up to you now. And the more you decelerate, the faster the earth is gonna, you know, collapse to hit you. You know, so the higher you jump up, the more impact there's gonna be from the earth beneath you when it hits you, because you're gonna reach almost zero, you know, or that's what terminal velocity would be. You know, the closer you get to terminal velocity or zero, the faster the impact on the earth on you is gonna be. You know, that's just pretty obvious. All right, so so I had a couple of questions that people brought up to my attention. So here's one, and it's funny because I actually have been thinking about this. So, oh my God, how does a file not exist? Let me see if I could find it. Okay, it's not that one. I think it's this one. Okay, let's see if it. Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna have to move that. Let's move that over here. I already had it all set up. Okay. So, I heard someone bring this to my attention. It's funny because I was thinking about this before. So, the comment is from Johnny Martyr. I listened to the full live video, and my question is about something you were talking about. Eric made a somewhat of a response video to Dell's questioning of the rising earth. Surely you have watched that video. When a slinky is dropped from above, wouldn't it make sense that the rising Earth will rise up to make contact with the bottom of the slinky first? But instead we see that the top of the slinky drops down until it makes contact with the bottom first, and then afterward the entire slinky finally makes contact with the Earth. So my response was, that's actually a good question. I've been thinking about the same exact thing myself. Why does the bottom of the slinky seem to stay in place or not move relative to the Earth until the top of the slinky hits it? I would think it has to do with the fact that when the slinky is released in midair, the force that was applied to make it stretch is causing that phenomenon. I will definitely be bringing this point up in one of my next videos. Thanks for asking the questions. So basically, I was thinking about that. How the top of the slinky comes into contact, and especially when they drop it next to another object, you start to see the other object starts to accelerate or decelerate, right? And the top of the slinky does the same, but the bottom of the slinky doesn't. So everything's moving except the bottom. So it's like, why doesn't the Earth come up to meet it, right? So it got me thinking, and actually got, I started looking into the slinky and how it behaves, and I looked at a couple videos. So I actually made my own video. So we'll play that video, and actually upload this video in my second channel, so some of you already seen it. Most of you actually probably already seen it, but for people that are watching this, rewatching this live, and who haven't seen it, I'll put it. It's only about 5 minutes. So. By the way, this is another observation, obviously, that people have to try to debunk the Earth rising, right? Why does the bottom of the slinky make sense? Another quick point about this, that observing the slinky's effects has to be in super slow motion. So we're watching this in super slow motion. So this is happening in less than a second. That's what people need to realize too, that this effect we're observing is happening in less than a second. But obviously, you have to see it in super slow motion so that, you're able to see it better. But
so if someone asked you why, when you let go of the slinky, does the bottom not fall, what do you say?
I'd say that there is, what you're doing, you're changing something at the top, and then there's a finite time for that information about the change to get to the bottom of the slinky. I mean, that happens even with a rigid bar, with a steel bar. It's just that the time is very, very short.
But a lot of people on the internet get uncomfortable with the term information. I mean, what are we saying by information in a physics sense?
It's a signal. So it's something, whenever you do something physically to affect a change, causality is, you do something and there's a cause and an effect. And between the two, information has to propagate, a signal has to propagate if they're not at the same location, physically at the same location. If you have extended systems.
So basically, that signal he's talking about is the signal from when you're holding it above and you release it. The reason why the slinky has a slight delay, obviously longer than other objects, is because of the shape of the slinky. So the shape of the slinky, because it's still one piece, but when you stretch it, you're adding tension to it. So that tension is distributed throughout the slinky, basically. So it's because of the shape of the slinky that we get this phenomenon, and obviously how the force is being applied, and how it's distributed through the slinky when it's being stretched, And then when you take that away, then we observe this phenomenon, which again happens in under a second. It happens fast. So that's why it has to be observed in super slow motion,
Then to consider the motion of the centre of mass in an extended system, you only need to consider the external force that acts on the centre. Yeah, on the centre of mass, and that's gravity. And that starts acting, instantly that this is released. It's there to begin with, but it's suspended, it's held up. And then once you take away that suspension, that centre of mass has to...
Yeah, even though we're, stretching the slinky, and, changing the center of mass, the whole slinky still drops at the same rate as everything else. That's the point.
Start accelerating downwards instantly. So if you watch the movie, you see that the red dot indeed, it's a good test for the modelling. The red dot does start to accelerate.
And you didn't build that into the model. You
No.
basically allowed that to...
After the fact, I calculate, once you've got the model at each time step, I calculate where that centre of mass is, and it does indeed start to fall immediately. I think we were talking about this earlier, and you actually see the bottom of this thing start to rotate about now. So there's some kind of torsional mode, some twisting mode, signal that gets down to the bottom of the slinky first, rushes ahead, but it doesn't actually relax. It doesn't release any tension clearly because the bottom just stays sitting there. It's only when all those other turns come down that that tension is relaxed.
Okay, so if you notice, the bottom of the slinky looks like it's just standing in midair until the top of it catches up with it. Okay, so the reason this happens because the only way that the bottom of the slinky can know when to start falling is when the tension in the line decreases, but the tension in the line can't decrease until the pressure wave catches up with it. And the pressure wave moves through the slinky at a finite speed. And so when
So it's funny because he's kind of inverting it. He's talking about when you release it, there's a pressure wave through the slinky, right? From the top to the bottom, right? But the reality is when he's holding it right now, we are seeing the pressure wave. When he's holding it, we're observing the pressure wave, not when he releases it. When we releases it, we're seeing the effects of the slinky when you release that force or that pressure initially. And the pressure wave is from top to bottom. If you see here, the top of, the rings on the top are more apart from each other, and the ones and the rings in the bottom are more close to each other, meaning there's more pressure above and there's a gradient to the bottom. So the pressure wave is when you're holding it. It's observable. You can see that there's a pressure wave that the slinky creates, again, because of its shape. The slinky creates that pressure wave,
you release the top, the pressure wave travels through, and as soon as the bottom feels that pressure wave, it can start falling. So I first saw a slinky drop movie from Veritasium, but they left out one critical point. They left out comparing where the center of mass of the slinky is compared to when it drops overall. But you can also think of it that the center of gravity starts falling as soon as you release it. So you can't full gravity. The center of gravity of the slinky is actually falling at the same acceleration as if you dropped a ball at about the center of gravity height here.
So real quick right here, there's more force or resistance from above the center of mass of the slinky than there is at the bottom. You can tell by how far apart the rings are at the top compared to how close together they are at the bottom. You can clearly observe it. So the top of the slinky is going to accelerate or decelerate faster than normal because of the extra resistance or force from above the center of mass. And the bottom of the slinky is going to decelerate slower than normal because it's below the center of mass. So it's going to do the opposite, But the slinky as a whole still falls or decelerates at the same rate as everything else. So again, that effect only happens because of the shape of the slinky.
So it's easy to believe that the bottom of the slinky can wait there almost weightless in midair as the top of the slinky catches up. But what if we tied a weight to it?
That's a good point, Execrate. Einstein said, since then, I have come to believe that the motion of the Earth cannot be detected by any optical experiment. That's true, optical. Sagnac and such, what they did was physical, not optical. Get it? Yeah? What Bell did was physical, not optical. Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly.
Like a roll of duct tape or something. Would the roll of duct tape just stay there in midair while the top of the slinky caught up with it? Let's check it out.
Yeah, the added resistance with the tape is stretching the slinky even more, changing the center of mass, but the same principles apply. Since you're adding more resistance, this happens even faster. So the deceleration from the top, because the slinky is even stretched even more, think of it like a spring. When you stretch it, it wants to come back to a state of equilibrium, So the more you stretch it, the more force you're adding, the more it's gonna accelerate, or in this case decelerate, because you're releasing that tension, and that's what's gonna make it contract, the deceleration. It's gonna seem to accelerate towards its state of equilibrium, but it's decelerating. The more you stretch it, the more force you add to it, the faster it's gonna decelerate. And that's what we're gonna witness here. Same principles.
Okay, now we're gonna do a gigantic slinky off the top of my roof. And let's see how long the bottom of the slinky stays suspended in midair before the pressure wave at the top of the slinky reaches the bottom.
Yeah, so the fact that the bottom of the slinky does move down slightly basically backs up the fact, or the claim, in my opinion, that's measurable, testable, repeatable, observable, that is decelerating slower than normal, because it's not just frozen, it just didn't freeze. It is moving very, again, this is a very, this video is these videos of the slinky are in super slow motion. You have to remember that. So this motion is happening within a second, so yeah, so this, the fact that you could see the bottom of the slinky move slightly down shows that it is decelerating still, but just at a slower rate than normal.
So what's amazing about this is that the top of the slinky hits the ground before the bottom of the slinky, which was only a few feet off the ground.
Yeah, you could see that when in reverse, how the slinky dropped once he released it. And now it looks like it's rising. Look at that, it looks like it's rising. He hasn't let it, he already let it go. Look at that. So yeah. So all the effects of the slinky can easily be explained with the Earth being in uniform constant motion, easily. Now, the question goes back to the stationary Earth claim. How are the stationary Earthers going to explain the top of the slinky dropping faster than the bottom of the slinky? If it's because of mass, if you think about it, there's more mass underneath of, when you're stretching the slinky, the fact that there's more mass underneath on the bottom, because the slinky comes together, meaning there's more mass, the bottom it should at least come down together, if the Earth was motion, if you ask me. It should come down together, I don't know, there's more mass underneath. If mass is the cause, then the bottom should, it's kind of like gravity, gravity apparently skips the bottom and just goes to the top, and then just pulls the top first, and it skips the bottom. I guess gravity doesn't like when the slinky's closed, so it skips it and it goes to the top, and that doesn't make any fucking sense. Now, if the Earth was accelerating, or accelerating in motion, constant motion, then that acceleration will be easily explained as a deceleration, and then the bottom of the slinky will just decelerate slower than normal, giving that effect. So pretty simple. Oh, there's a lot of students coming, so we'll see if anybody stops. I have one more demonstration that I want to share, but I want to see if any students stop by first. There's a wave of students coming from that direction, coming from behind me. Well, they just passed, but I'm assuming there's more that are gonna come, so we'll see if anybody stops. Alright, let me just show this one real quick. I actually seen Delp use this video in his live stream earlier towards the end, and I thought it was very interesting. So since I was talking about the slinky, might as well finish it off with this one. It's a very short one. So this is the slinky, just in different mediums. So here you go. For sure most of you already seen it, but for anybody new that hasn't. What we're gonna observe is when we change the medium, the slinky, it's literally gonna do the same thing. It's gonna, basically do the same phenomenon, but just and at a slower rate depending on the density of the medium, right? So the reason why the top obviously dropped is the same principles and the bottom doesn't, is because the bottom obviously has less resistance than the top. Therefore, you could say it's almost at equilibrium with the oil or the substance that it's in, especially if it's a thicker substance. It's going to be more at equilibrium with that. Therefore, because there's not as much resistance in the bottom, so it's just going to look like it's just in midair, you know. So it's the same principles, just slowed down, basically, changing the medium. So I thought that was an interesting video. But yeah, that's the Slinky. The Slinky, you know, doesn't debunk the Earth's motion. If anything, it just proves it even more, if you ask me. The top and the bottom compact the same as it's in the middle. That's the most slack until the end. Exactly. That's the thing when it comes to electrostatics, always improving. There's no practical demonstrations of electrostatics recreating the density layers or recreating weight, for example, or recreating any of these phenomenon that we observe, right? So, and how does electrostatics create orientation? Another thing, you know. So the globe, you know, they're the way they create orientation, because again, you need a force. That's the thing. You need a force to create orientation. And motion is a force, so therefore, you know, something needs to be in motion to be creating orientation. So the question is, what about the mass of an object that creates orientation, or the density of an object that creates orientation, right? The globe claims that the center of mass is, or it's what creates orientation. That's what gives you the downwards vector. Oh, hey. How's it going? Hey, so you want to give it a shot?
What is
Do you think you're smarter than a 5th grader?
I mean, yeah.
Should be, right? So they actually have 3 very easy common sense questions. They have to do with common sense, very
Wait,
easy.
wait, are you recording this?
I'm recording.
Oh, okay, I never mind.
Okay, no problem then. I understand. Yeah. All right. Yeah, if people are camera shy, it's fine. You know, I could have gave her some info to go. That's true. And there's a lot of students passing by, so we'll see if anybody stops. You guys have time? All right, no problem. You are? You want to take a card?
No.
Yeah? No? All right, no worries. I think they're high school students, to be honest. I think they're doing like a little tour. Okay, so again, So again, back to orientation, right? And how you need a force to create orientation. So the globe claim is that mass, you know, the center of mass creates orientation, that being down, you know. So the center of mass is what down, you know, by a magic pulling force. Again, that's that's the force, you know, that's creating the orientation, right? So the mass, the center, and since the Earth is the biggest, you know, object, you know, the most mass, everything's gonna go towards the center of that mass. So, you know, the globe, you know, claims that, you know, mass creates orientation because it's just bigger, you know, basically that's what it says, and everything goes towards the center of that. So obviously that's fucking cartoon physics. That's made up, you know, cartoon physics. Basically, it doesn't exist in anywhere in reality, basically. So now, if you claim the Earth is stationary, what's the force that's creating orientation? Now, if you say density and buoyancy, obviously we know buoyancy is an effect, but density of an object, it's like, what about the density of an object that gives it a force to move it? And then also, what is it about the ground that makes it go towards the ground? You know what I'm saying? So you need a force and you need directionality or a cause for orientation. You know, at least the globe has that, you know, the center of mass. So is it the same thing that density goes towards the most dense, which will be the Earth? So is it the same claim as gravity? Density has direction because it just goes towards the most dense. That doesn't make any sense. And then also, what's causing that motion? What's pressing against the object to make it go towards the most dense? That's what people are not asking. What's pressing the object down that's making it go towards the more dense? Now, if people are claiming electrostatics or air pressure from above creating that direction or creating that orientation, how does the air pressure, first of all, not push helium down? That's a very simple, you know, gravity, obviously the same thing goes for gravity. If gravity can pull everything down, how is it that it's not pulling helium down, which is much lighter than everything else? Same thing with air pressure pressing everything down. If air pressure is pressing everything down, creating orientation, not only the question is how is it doing it, but why doesn't it press helium down also? You know what I'm saying? So going into water, right? The surface of water, right? Always level, right? It's always a perfectly straight line, right? So we could agree that the vector, the up and down vector, is always perpendicular, you know, 90 degrees, always, because water is always the number one tool for measuring level, and water is always level. So keep that in mind. I was thinking about the tides. I don't know why I started thinking about the tides, right? The low tide and high tide, right? So, and this is where it took me. So I was trying to understand, okay, so we have a high tide and a low tide at the same time on opposite sides of the Earth, right? We have a high tide and a low tide. And then we get the opposite effect. And that happens twice a day. So we have 2 high tides and 2 low tides. So it does high tide and low tide. Now, I looked up the definitions of that just to get a better understanding, you know, because obviously the high tide and low tides, it could be physically measurable. It's physically measurable, you know. People build piers, you know, we build piers, you know, and we take account this rising and dropping of the elevation of water, you know, or the supposed rising and dropping, right? So, oh my God, why doesn't those files exist? I'm having to redo all this, even though I already had all these ready. Okay, so we have this one. So here we have the difference in height between the high tide and the low tide is called the tidal range. So a horizontal movement, keep that in mind as well. A horizontal movement of water often accompanies the rising and falling of the tide, right? So the tidal range, you know. But let me see. Hopefully that one's good. Oh my God, I'm having to input all these files in again. Son of a gun. Tell me I'm gonna have to do this with all of them. Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's move this up. Let's move this here. So the typical tidal range in the open ocean is about 1 meter, 3 feet. That's the average, I would assume, all across 3 feet. But closer to the coast, that you know, the tide it gets higher. You know, the tide, so this tide is much greater at the coastal, you know, I would say at the sides, globally, and differ anywhere from 0 to over 16 meters, which is over 52 feet. So the tidal range, in other words, is not a constant number all across the earth, all across the pond, you could say. It's a deviation, basically, all the way from 52 to 0. And here's the thing, on the opposite end you get the opposite effect. So when it's a high tide on one side, you get the low tide on the other, and then it's a gradual, you know, descent, you know. So here, let me see, son of a gun. Yeah, I'm having to input all these files again, even though I already did this before, but it's fine. So this is what the globe explanation is to that phenomenon of the high tide on one side and the low tide on the other, and also having a gradient. The tidal range is not even all across the board. It goes from as high to 52 to as low as 0. So this is as the Earth keeps rotating, another high tide occurs on the same area when it's on the opposite side of the Earth, opposite to the moon. So obviously the globe explanation, the force, you know, that's causing the water to bulge or rise is the force of the moon. So the force of the Earth is keeping the water, you know, level to the center, but then the gravity, the force of gravity of the moon, it's creating that high tide and low tide, you know. And so, you know, that's pretty funny to me. And then this is like a little, oh my god, I can't believe I'm having to do all this right now again. This is like a little drawing that they show for that. You know what I'm saying? So the typical tidal range, okay, so the difference in height between the tidal range, so it's a horizontal movement of water, you know, that deviates, you know, in altitude. So, oh my god, there's a bunch of other students coming. I'll come back to this after that. I'll come back to this after this wave. To be honest, I think it's just more high school students. Yeah, it's more high school students. There's another word I was trying to use instead of deviate. All right. So the difference in height, okay, so this is the definitions of the tidal range. There's a tidal, there's a apparent rise and drop of water, but it's not an even rise. So in other words, it rises more in one at the edges or at the coasts, and then that rise appears to be lower, you know, in other parts of the earth, you know. So we could say it's like a deviation, you know. The tidal range deviates from as high, you know, to 52 all the way down to 0, and then on the opposite, you could say on the opposite side it does the opposite. So, you know, so when you have a high tide, you get a low tide on the other end, right? So you tell me what makes more sense. So in my opinion, since we understand, you know, the physics of water, you know, the surface always forms a horizontal plane, especially when connected to the earth. So another way to look at it is that again, water always orients, or, you know, it's always perpendicular to the up and down vector, right? So if we look at a graph that will make more sense to the high and low tide based on our understanding of the physics of water and based on how the tidal range goes from high to low, and then an opposite end does the opposite. A more better depiction will be something like this. So as you can see here, this is not to scale. This is just for demonstration purposes. In my opinion, the physics of water, since we understand, always forms a horizontal line on the top, a good way to understand the high and low tide will be something like this. If you could see on the left side of this north and center picture, on the left side, the red line indicates the tidal range that we could see here in this right here. So that red line, the distance between that red line and the water will be the tidal range. It goes from as high as 52 feet down to 0 the closer you get to the center of the tilt. So, so if the water's level and it tilts slightly, we will get that effect of 52 feet being at the coast, and then, that gradual, decrease down to 0, and then the opposite effect on the other coast. So we'll get a high tide on one end and a low tide on the other. So the question is, based on our understanding of water and the physics of water, and based on our understanding of how the tides work and how the water doesn't drop in elevation evenly all across the earth and rise evenly all across the earth, because then you will have a high tide everywhere evenly and then a low tide everywhere evenly. You wouldn't get the high tide on one end and the low tide on the other unless the surface of water is going on a slight slant like that. So if the highest can differ from 0 all the way up to 52 feet, we could round that up to 60 feet, 60 feet. Because a lot of people are going to say, oh, we would see that degree of change of the water. The thing is, 52 feet relative to what the earth is, like around, we don't know the size of the earth, but we could say it's over 30,000 miles across, right? We can say that, we don't know the exact, but 52 feet relative to 30,000 miles across, you're not going to notice if there's a deviation, in the water, or in my opinion, because we understand the physics of water. Water doesn't have the ability to move by itself, and it doesn't have the ability to do this on itself, because that's technically what the water appears to be doing. Let me see, let me take this one out. So the water appears to be doing this, and that's why we get the high tide on one end, the high tide on one end, and the low, and then the low tide on the other end, and then the opposite happens. So the water seems to be doing this, if you ask me. And if you got to ask yourself, if the earth is motionless, how do you explain the water doing this, right? And it does this twice a day, by the way, because we get a high tide and then a low tide twice a day. So, say it happens every 12 hours, and then, the water level. If you ask me, because we understand water doesn't have the ability to move on its own, and water, the levelness of water always follows the orientation, the downwards vector that is already there, which in my opinion, the Earth's motion is creating that vector, So in my opinion, if we understand that the vector is created by the Earth's motion, and the water level always orientates itself to the level, or it always orientates it perpendicular to the vector, then we can logically assume that the water's not doing this by itself, but it's actually the Earth. So if the Earth did a slight tilt, the water would appear to deviate at a slant, but then it would basically reorientate itself again. And then again, it will happen. If you get another tilt, the water will have to reorientate itself again, giving the appearance that the water is tilting. But in reality, it's the Earth tilting, and the water is just following that tilt. And that's what will give us the high tide and the low tide, based on how we understand the physics of water being level. That will give us the gradient from the tidal range. That will give us a tidal range gradient, and it will give us the high tide on one end and the low tide on the other end at the same time. It's not the water tilting, because again, the water's not being drained out and then added back, because you wouldn't get an opposite. You wouldn't get a high tide and a low tide on the opposite end of the earth or on the ocean, because again, the ocean is one giant body of water. It's all connected, So if the water's being drained out, it's gonna drain evenly. And then when the high tide comes, the high tide's gonna be even all across Earth. And then when the low tide comes, it's going to be, but we don't witness the evenness of the high tide and the low tide. We witness a gradient from high to low, and on the opposite, we witness the opposite of that, from low to high. You know, that can only be explained if the surface of water is doing this, if you ask me. So if the earth was stationary, I would say, what's causing the water to shift? The ocean's huge. It's a huge body of water. It's all one, you know, because people are always going to ask, well, why aren't the lakes doing it? Well, because lakes aren't big enough, you know, they're not big enough as a body of water on Earth. And I actually looked it up. The lakes that are actually, I looked up, are tides affected by waves, right? I mean by waves, by the are lakes affected by the high tide and low tide, right? And based on what we know, what people measured, apparently. So here is a quick answer real quick to that. Again, this could be measured, you know. So true tides, changes in water levels caused by the gravitational forces of the sun and moon, obviously that's bullshit, the sun and moon don't have, do occur in semi-directional twice daily pattern on the Great Lakes. So again, the big lakes, the biggest lakes on Earth that are connected to the ocean, I'm assuming, or I don't even know. Point being is that studies indicate that the Great Lakes spring tide, the largest tides caused by the combined forces of the sun and moon, is less than 5 centimeters in height. So it does affect the Great Lakes. So the tilt of the Earth, it's going to affect the, you know, the big body of water, the ocean, the most. You're going to be able to, because again, but it does affect the Great Lakes again. But anything smaller, you're not going to be able to notice that. I'm sorry?
For the TV show?
YouTube. So in my opinion, if the Earth was in motion, you know, the tides, at least to me, would indicate that the Earth is not moving. If the directional vector is being created by the motion of the Earth, and water follows the directional vector, in other words, it's always perpendicular to the vertical, which it is. Water is always, when it lays level and flat, it's always perpendicular to the vertical. Then that shift of the water, if you ask me, is the Earth's tilt instead. So here, look, I did a little video real quick. Hopefully I don't have to fucking look for that one, but we'll see. A little demonstration real quick. So that's 6 centimeters, the first one. Then on the other end, it's gonna be 6 centimeters as well. You guys can take a look at that. And the center, it's gonna be 6.5 centimeters. So it's 0.5 centimeters higher. Again, since we understand the physics of water, I can't make the surface of the water bend. That's impossible. I cannot make the surface of water do this, you know, do a slant. You know, that's impossible. That defies physics. What doesn't defy physics is if the reference frame or the container tilts, and especially if the container is creating the orientation, then the water is going to have to follow that orientation if the Earth does do that. So in this case, it doesn't, because obviously we're on Earth, but this is what it would look like. This is what the deviation would look like. You would deviate. Now we see that, you know, that side went down and this side went up, but anything towards the center stays the same, or the closer to the center from the tilt, the less you will notice the elevation change, or the. So here we go. So you could call this side high tide because it's, you know. Okay. Oh, I already did both. Let me see. All right. But yeah, the tilt, again, it would only affect the larger bodies of water the most. So the ocean would be displaying that the most. Because again, the deviation changes. It's a gradient. It's not, you know, 52 feet all across. It goes from 52 feet, the rise, the apparent rise of the tide, and it's a gradient. And then on the opposite end is the opposite. that would literally create a slant. That creates a slant, and that would, you know, the surface of water is always straight. So, and if water follows the orientation of the earth, if the earth is and if the earth tilts slightly, guess what's going to happen with the water? It's going to have to reorientate. It's going to have to move, aka cause the high and low tides, you know. The way I see it, it makes sense. Again, I'm not saying it's proof of anything, but it aligns with the, you know, with the earth being in motion, which, you know, aligns with our understanding of physics and how things, you know, behave. Again, on a stationary earth, how would you explain the high tide and low tide on opposite ends? You know, on a stationary earth, you know, what kind of, you know, because the water's not being drained. That's a fact. The water's not being drained out and then drained back in. We will get in, there will be no gradient from the tidal range. It would just go down like this, evenly all across, and it will go back up if it was being, if the ocean water was being drained in and out. So that, we could throw that out the window. So what's causing the water to appear to do this? What's causing the whole body of water of the ocean, the whole body of is doing this? What kind of force is doing that? If it's not a slight tilt of the earth, again, this tilt, so that people could get a visualization of how minute the degree of tilt that's going to be in comparison to the size of the earth. 52 feet, we'll round that up to 60 feet. If the earth was 30 to 40,000 miles across and there was only a tilt of 60 feet on one end, that's equivalent to having a field or a lake or whatever that's 20 miles across, you know, 20 miles across, and they're only being 1 centimeter in deviation from one end. And that deviation is going to get less and less and less the closer you get towards the center, and then you'll witness the opposite effect happen on the other. So that's the equivalent, and how minute that angle will be. Basically, it will be like 0.00001 of a degree. You wouldn't be able to physically measure the degree, but you'll be able to measure the drop in the water level, because water is the number one tool, is 100% level always. So if the water, you know, seems to rise and get low, then we know water doesn't move on its own. We could assume that the reference frame is causing that apparent rise and drop, you know, of the water level, you know. It's just, if you ask me, the tides will show that the earth doesn't have to be moving in a straight line, basically. If the earth is in motion, it's not moving in a straight line. And the water shows us that, the ocean water, you know. Again, I'm just speculating here. I'm not saying this is proof of anything, you know, but it just aligns with what we understand the physics of water does, you know. We can't bend, we can't slant, you know, there's no force or anything mechanical or any technology that can make the surface of water do this, especially the ocean water, you know. So, where on earth are tides higher and lowest? We don't know that, Boomy. That's the thing, we don't know the dimensions of the earth. So try to use a map to debunk the physics of water and the high tide and low tide, the gradient of the tidal range. If you're gonna use a map to try to debunk that, then you're too far gone, because nobody knows the dimensions of the earth. So, because I know that's where this is gonna go. Oh, we have a high tide in North America, but then there's another low tide, you know, almost next to it, so that wouldn't fit the model, you know. But again, I know what people are gonna try to do. They're gonna try to use a model to try to debunk the high tide and low tide, you know, to try to debunk the motion of the earth, basically. But then I would go and ask, well, how does it work on a stationary earth? How does a high tide and low tide work on a stationary earth? What's causing that movement of water? It's a movement of water. Again, their own definition is a horizontal movement of water. That's Google's definition. You know, because that's what it is. It's a horizontal movement of water. What's causing that horizontal movement of water to give you this apparent effect of high tide and low tide on the opposite on the opposite post, and also the gradient. You know. So it's like if the Earth is stationary, I don't know how that the sun's heat makes the immense amount of water expand. This causes swelling tides. So the sun's heat, so if I have a cup of water and I add heat to it, it's gonna bulge up. Is that what you're saying? Because from my understanding, heat vaporizes water, so it's not gonna cause bulges. So if heat is making the water rise, that's funny. If that's what you think, oh my god, nothing personal, but come on. Water evaporates with heat, it doesn't bulge up. You know. So that's just another thing to add to the list of things that only work if the earth has motion. and how things doesn't, you know, work if the Earth was motionless. You know, the tides, in my opinion, you know, wouldn't work on a motionless Earth, because then you would have to explain. Well, you don't have to explain, but then that's the thing. There's not even a logical explanation. Therefore, you know, yet alone a practical experiment. If you can't even come up with a practical explanation, you're not gonna come up with a practical experiment, you know, to explain the water, you know, doing this. You know, I don't know. No, yeah, execrate. We have to question the claims, and we have to go with physics to basically, if we want to debunk a claim, physics has to be the tools you use to debunk claims, you know. Yeah, to be honest, this just came to me like in the last week or so. Like I'm telling you, I don't even know why I started thinking about tides, like out of nowhere. And I got it, and you know, I started looking into them, and I found out there was a tidal gradient and all these things, and how the opposite coast you get the opposite effect when there's a tide. So it just got me thinking. So I kind of looked into it, and to be honest, I was trying to prepare for this presentation as much as I could, and it's not that easy, man. So I'm definitely gonna be, you know, speaking about this subject, you know, more. Because again, some people might say, oh, it doesn't matter what makes things fall, blah, 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 blah. It's like, that sounds like when people say, oh, it doesn't matter what shape the earth is, which is true. Again, it does. The shape of the earth doesn't matter. What makes things fall doesn't matter. What matters is understanding physics. That's what matters. So when people say, oh, it doesn't matter what's causing things to fall. What do you mean it doesn't matter? So you're saying, so you just be blind, basically? So don't have an understanding of your reality then? That doesn't make any sense. So it does matter because it has to do with understanding, you know, it has to do with comprehension, you know. If you dismiss it, you're not comprehending, you know. So, and if your go-to is, oh, well, we can't go outside of it to prove 100% that it's true. If that's your go-to, then you better not be claiming that the earth is motionless either, because you can't go outside the reference frame to prove it. Your own logic. So people that are saying that, oh, you can't prove it, so therefore you can't say it's rising, well, you better not be saying it's motionless either. You know, that's the way I see it. You know, so I'm going based on physics and what physics shows, and physics shows me that matter, you know, doesn't move on its own, that it requires a force. Water in specific, water is very sensitive to movement, very sensitive to movement. I think water, you know, it's like one of the most sensitive elements to sound, you know, maybe the air as well with air waves, you know, but it's part of water as well. So I don't know. Got some students passing by. I think they want to give it a shot. You guys want to give it a shot? Yeah? You guys could try it as a group, whoever, you know. You guys want to give it a shot? I mean, the more the merrier, right?
Yeah, the more the merrier.
Okay, so first question, are you guys smarter than a fifth grader?
I hope so.
Yeah, right? That's obvious. So these questions have to do with common sense. So I have 3 questions, and let's see if you can get at least 2 of 3. And all of you guys could try. So the first one's the hardest, but then they get easier. All right, so I have 2 images here, and the reason I call them images is because one of them's a photograph and one of them's a painting.
Oh shit.
So I want to see if, I mean, all of you could look at it, and then I can just ask you guys by a raise of hands.
Oh.
Painting?
I mean,
No.
okay.
I think I know what's
Is this going on YouTube?
Yeah, I do have a YouTube. Yeah.
That's a painting. That's the photo. Painting, photo.
What the fuck?
So, by raise of hand, which one of you think this is the photograph? So I'll show it up. So which one of you think this is the photograph?
Yeah.
I want to say that's the photograph because like how like the background is, but also I know people can just paint the background. So I'm gonna say that's the photograph.
Which one's which one do you think this is the photograph? No, so you think this is the photograph?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, one's a drawing, one's a painting, one's a photograph.
I feel dumb.
Okay, so everybody got to look at it. So It's actually a trick question. They're both paintings.
Oh shit.
What?
Yeah. So they're both paintings. Yeah, you guys can take a look at them. Yeah. So I didn't expect anyone to get this one. Maybe one of you probably thought that, maybe not. But there is 2 reasons why I asked this question, though. I don't expect people to get it, by the way. And it has to do with common sense. The first reason is just believing someone opens the door to being deceived, right? Because you guys believe me that once a photograph. So it's not good to just believe someone. The second reason is if you want to determine something is real, an image is not good enough. Because if I show you an image of me flying or me walking on water, would you guys believe I could do those things?
No.
No. So if an image defies physics, we gotta throw the image away, and we gotta go with physics, what we know. If you guys gotta go here, I'll give you guys a card, because this is what I talk about. We didn't have enough time to get into it, but here, you guys could take a card real quick.
I'm taking a card.
My
Thank you.
channel is the first one on top.
Alright.
There you go. You want one?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, check it out. I'm actually live right now, so you guys can check it out.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. Alright, man. It's the first one on there. Yeah, they're high school students. They're not gonna have time to do this. They're like on a little tour. Yeah, it looks like you guys don't have time. You guys just want to take some info? Yeah? Yeah, because I try to do this, with them, but oh my god. Here, I'll give you guys my card. And you guys can check out my channel.
On your channel?
Yeah, YouTube channel. It's the first one on there.
Oh shoot.
There you go. You guys can check it out. And I'm actually live right now, so if you guys have a question, it's this one. It's facing me. It's facing me. You guys come over here. Over here. There you go.
You yourself?
Get lower. There you go.
Alright, I gotta go.
All right, man. All right, man. Take care.
Have a good life.
Man, you too, man.
You're not famous.
Oh man, that would have been great. I had like when I was gonna start the conversation, the first one, there was easily like 20 students. They were high school students. Easily like 20, 30, probably more around the table. I was so happy I was gonna get to do the pitch, but then they had to go. Like, oh no. I even turned the camera so that you could see the whole group, but oh wow, dang. That would have been great, man. Damn it. At least I passed out some cards. Oh man. Let me check the live on my phone, because I can't scroll this live. See if I missed any questions or any points. Alright, a lot of people are already mature. Hopefully they're putting it around. Nice Chinese, thanks for longer. See how much time I got. Alright. See if I could get one more conversation. Now we'll just call it. With text, I can't tell if you're being sarcastic. That's true. Sarcasm goes out the window when you're reading text, huh? I know, I was thinking I have to put, the tides thing. I might make a little video and put it on my second channel, because that's where I put experiments and observations. And I do want to make like a video highlighting that, like just a short video that gets to the point, you know what I'm saying? Because I know me trying to explain it here, with my mind scrambling, it's not as easy to present it, especially clearly. So, maybe I didn't make sense to some people, maybe I did, but the fact is that the tools are there. Water, the physics of water, the high tide and the low tide are measurable, and all of these things, are there for us to understand. That's the whole point. It doesn't matter, if it doesn't matter, then what you're saying is that understanding doesn't matter. And if understanding doesn't matter, then what matters? Think about that. If understanding doesn't matter, what matters? I don't know. Tides are caused by the moons in the ocean. How does the moon affect the tides again? How does the gravity of the moon, shoot out into objects and then bring them back? What is this gravity like? it like shoots, you know, in every direction, and then it pulls everything out. Like, so it shoots out and pulls, like it's pulling every molecule from the ocean, the moon's gravity. It's grabbing every little molecule from the ocean, and the ocean's huge, you know, so it's grabbing and it's pulling it. That's fucking retarded. Maybe. That's funny. That's a big leap of faith there. It's not backed up by anything practical, nothing demonstrable, nothing measurable, nothing testable. The Earth's tilt would make sense again, because if the vectors being created by the Earth's motion, that being down, if the Earth's tilt was to be just very minute, like even tilted, you know, a fraction of a degree, we wouldn't be able to detect it, but water would detect that. And that's the high tide and low tide, in my opinion. You know, it's reorientating itself, you know. So again, the Earth doesn't have to be moving in a straight line. The high tide and low tide should show that, you know. Again, you know. But yeah, it'll be a good thing to make a little short video. Again, I don't have beliefs, you know. I don't believe that the Earth, you know, is rising, or I'm going based on what I know, you know. So if we can't go outside the reference, which is true, to prove this 100%, then we can only theorize, right? But there could only be one scientific theory when it comes to it. Only one that explains all the phenomena. What, like gravity tries to do, you know, how they try to be the one theory to explain everything, you know, and that's why it's a scientific theory. The fact is, the Earth being in constant motion is the real scientific theory that explains everything. It explains weight, it explains the pressure gradient, it explains helium's rising, being pushed up by the resistance of the air, because again, air cannot resist denser objects when it's moving through them. But helium, it could resist helium, because helium is less dense than air. So the motion of the air pressure of the gradient is pushing it up to its equilibrium. That's what's happening with the helium balloon. So again, all the phenomenon that we observe could be easily explained with the Earth being in constant motion. Even the high tide and low tide could be explained by the Earth being in motion, you know. So again, I'm open to any other explanations, practical explanations, not just explanations, that we practical explanations, and something demonstrable to back it up. Because if it's a practical explanation, then you should have a practical demonstration as well. Just like I did with the water, you know, with the container of water and with the Legos. You know, that's a practical demonstration of how the surface of water will appear to be at a slant if the Earth tilted. You know what I'm saying? So again, I'm open to any, you know, practical demonstrations and explanations of what causes all these phenomena that we observe of motion, of density, and buoyancy, and even the motion of the ocean, you know. So another thing is when people say that, oh, it doesn't matter if the Earth is right. If you're about truth, or, you know, if you're trying to debunk the heliocentric model, let's focus on that, because that's what it's all about, is debunking the heliocentric model and their claims. The Earth being in constant motion, literally, the Earth being in constant motion and the water being level, those two things destroy the whole heliocentric model. The whole heliocentric model. Everything that they try to explain, like the pressure gradient and all of these phenomena, even gravity being the container, right? Gravity being the container of the air, that's why it doesn't leave. All these fucking, you know, things that we can, you know, all the effects that we're observing could be easily debunked by that. So the fact that other truthers, and again, it could be practically demonstrated, it's not just a claim, you know. We can recreate, you know, the density layers and the pressure gradients using motion. So the fact that other flat earthers are not jumping on this in a positive way, at least, not just dismissing or attacking it, it's a little weird. Because if you ask me, it's like the final dagger on the globe. Literally people cannot let go of the globe fantasy because of their belief in gravity. They want something to replace that. So I think it's a bit ironic that the Earth being, you know, the one that's demonstrable is the first thing that's ridiculed when you look into this subject. You know, I think that's very very sneaky or very fishy, at least. You know, it's very weird, you know, just to dismiss it, you know, for no reason, you know, with nothing practical, you know. So yeah, it's just something, you know, I think it's something, you know, to think about, and I think it is important because, again, it's the final dagger on the globe, literally. Another thing that I've seen stationary earthers try to use to prove or to debunk the earth being in motion is the same claims that globe earthers use. For example, oh, in a frictionless environment, objects will continue their motion. You know, once you know, if you push an object in motion, it's going to continue that motion even when you let it go, even when you release that force. In a frictionless environment, it's just going to keep going. So how does an object start to decelerate, right? First of all, frictionless environments don't exist. Vacuums don't exist. So you're talking about an imaginary reference right now. You know. Second, we live in air pressure. There is resistance here. You know, there's movement. You know, there's friction. So to claim that, oh, the item wouldn't decelerate because of my imaginary reference frame experiment, you know, doesn't allow that to happen. So it wouldn't work. So because of what you imagine, you know, yourself, what will happen in a frictionless reference frame, you're using imagination to try to debunk the practical. You know, that's what literally people are doing. They're imagining a frictionless reference frame, which again, it was just told to them because it doesn't exist. And they're told that if an object's in motion in this friction, it would always stay in that motion. Again, that's imaginary. That's not real. And you're trying to use that to debunk what's demonstrable, you know, the physics. That's stupid. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Oh my God. Let's see. See if there's anything here. Suits The Jolly Man, how do you know the Earth is at rest? Did you exit the reference frame to prove that? I actually don't know. No, yeah. I mean, the physics that shows that an object requires a force to have motion is not it's not derived from an axiom. It's derived from practical demonstration. You know, it's a fact. Objects don't move on their own. You know, it's a fact that you need pressure to have weight. You need something pressing against something else to have weight. Now, these are facts. You know. Now, when you dive deeper into the causes of these things and what makes water, you know, all these, when you start getting philosophical, then that's where it becomes abstract. But if you just stick to physics, you know, that's what's gonna show you what it is. Maybe a stupid question, but what about the balloons that are half helium and half oxygen that are just float? When balloons have half helium and half oxygen, you're basically changing the density of the balloon. That's all you're doing. You're changing the density. Therefore, when the helium, and it's just helium, the motion or the pressure gradient is pushing it up, you know, to a state of equilibrium. But since you're adding air into it, you're changing its equilibrium now. So that's why it floats, because you're just changing its equilibrium. You know, you're changing the mass. You're changing the mass per square inch. You know, equal to the area that surrounds it. Basically, you're equalizing the pressure to the area that surrounds it, and that's why it floats. You're just finding equilibrium, basically, with the balloon, with the helium and the air. You know. So it basically moves with the reference frame because you know it's at equilibrium at that level. You know, you take the air out and it's gonna start to move up because the equilibrium is not at that level. If it's just helium, it's way up higher because it's less dense. When you add air, you add more, you know, density to it. Therefore, you keep adding more and more and more air, it's gonna start to fall because the air outside can't resist it anymore, can't hold it up. You know, so it's just gonna fall. So again, it's just finding the equilibrium. You know, it's a sweet spot. This is exactly what I'm saying though. Rising Earth invokes an additional reference frame electrostatic. Electrostatics being an inclination keeps it more internet. Again, that's the thing. Electrostatics has explanations, but they don't have nothing demonstrable. They don't have nothing to create a vector or motion or weight. You know, you might be able to move some objects with electricity, but that still doesn't give you weight or orientation. You know, you need a force, you need motion to have orientation. You know, orientation just is part of the creation, exactly. So what's creating it? You know what I'm saying? And that's where I think people that believe in stationary Earth are bypassing. They're jumping over that fact that something is dictating orientation. You know, I would accept it more if they said like, well, that's just God's will. It's just the way God made it. And some people do say that it's just the way it is. We don't know, you know, and it's just the way it is, which if you want to believe that, that's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're looking at the practical, you know, that actually does show you. I'm sorry? Sure. Yeah, I'm interviewing people. You want to give it a shot? All right, let's go. So, 3 very easy questions. They have to do with common sense. So, the first one's the hardest, but then they get easier.
No, I just want to see this.
Oh, okay.
Oh, God. Now I got viewers. All right.
All right, so I mean, you guys could give it a shot too. It's pretty easy, elementary level.
Okay.
So the first one's the hardest, but then they get easier. So I have 2 images here, and the reason I call them images is because one of them's a photograph and one of them's a painting. So I want to see if people can tell the difference.
One was a painting and one was a photograph. This one's a painting?
Okay, what do you think?
I think that's a painting.
I think this is a painting. It's actually a trick question. They're both paintings. Yeah, so I don't expect people to get this one, obviously, because it's impossible to tell. These are very realistic, right? So, but there is 2 reasons why I asked this question, and it has to do with common sense. The first reason is just believing someone opens the door to being deceived, right? Because you're believing that one's a photograph, that influenced your choice, right? So it's not good to just believe someone. The second reason is if one to determine something is real, an image is not good enough. Because if I show you an image of me flying or me walking on water, will you believe I could do those things?
No.
No, right? Because if an image defies physics, we got to throw that image away, basically. That's my point. So the next 2 actually has to do with physics, elementary physics. Has to do with water. So could we agree once water is contained, like in this bottle, it always seeks the lowest point? In other words, it always goes down. First, I could turn the bottle upside down, but water always goes down. Yeah, it always does that. I can never get it to stay up there. You know, it's impossible. So since we understand that fact about water, I took 2 pictures of my water bottle, one like this and one upside down, and I painted the water blue with food coloring just to make it easier to see. But since we understand that water always goes down, how I'm showing you these 2, which one is upside down? Which image is upside down? Since we understand water always goes to the bottom or down, which one is upside down?
They're both upside down?
I mean, if you're looking at the water is going to show you which one's upside down.
Is it?
Yeah.
You could have just taken it like the wrong angle.
But that's the thing, even if I took it from a wrong angle, water is always going to level out to the...
Sure, but the surface could also be placed under something that's like above, could be glued to something.
But even if I did glue it, the water is always going to go down, isn't it?
Yeah, so you glue this to the...
So which one's upside down then? Which one's the one that I took upside down?
It's impossible, no. Because you could have tricked...
I mean, if your answer is that is neither, that's fine. Okay, now you turn the right side up. This is the one that was upside down. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I can never get the water to stick to the top of the bottle. So I actually took this one like this, holding it up to the ceiling.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah. So how I was showing them to you, which one's upside down then? This one. It's the obvious one. You get it, right? Because the physics of water, I cannot manipulate water to stay up.
You're not a water vendor.
Exactly. I'm not a water vendor. Exactly. So you understand. So another thing about water, it always finds its level. Would you agree, right? What could be another word for level? When we're talking about balance, a good one. horizontal is actually the proper definition for level, because if we have a straight line at a slope, it's not level. So it has to be a horizontal straight line, and that's what level means. So since we understand that fact about water as well, that it always finds its level, which one of these two represents level as we know it, A or B? If you don't mind, I'm just gonna change the battery real quick.
Yeah, we should. Sorry, we gotta go. We have
You guys gotta go?
one. Yeah.
Okay, no worries.
Sorry.
You guys take care.
Thank you.
All right.
You still got me for another 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Can you reframe your question?
So since we understand water always finds its level,
Uh-huh.
which one of these two represents level as we know it?
It could be both. Oh, as we know it.
As we know it.
Okay.
That's the obvious one, right? So the real reason I do this is because over 95% of the population, including myself and maybe you, have been tricked to believing this is what level means, even though we know it's this one. You want to know how we were tricked?
How?
Do you believe the Earth is a ball?
It's not.
Right? That's what they told us. So NASA in specific, they claim to have satellites orbiting the Earth, so they need to know the radius of orbit, you know, if they're supposedly going around it. So they do tell us the radius of the Earth is 3,159 miles. So based on that radius, we get a curvature drop of 8 inches per mile squared. So it drops 8 inches in the first mile, second mile is 32 inches, and by the third mile, it should be 6 feet. So that it's a curve, it's not a slope, so it has to increase every mile.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? So basically, if we went to a giant lake, you know, that was miles across, to physically measure for this curvature that they're claiming, the water is going to show us that it's going to be perfectly level to anything horizontal above it, so we won't measure any curvature. But they're trying to tell us that the surface of water is bending 8 inches per mile square and increasing. So in 10 miles, there should be 66 feet of curvature. You know, so in my opinion, a physical measurement of the Earth will be the number one proof to debunk the globe. You know, it's physical. So if I was to ask you, what's the number one proof or reason that makes you believe that the Earth is a ball?
There's a lot. I would say first off would be I listen to people who I think are more educated than me in the area.
So you take it on faith, basically.
It's not purely on faith. It's kind of taking, kind of listening. I'm actually interested in I've watched I think 2 documentaries on the flat earthers, and I mean obviously both of them had their own biases and whatnot. But I try to look at both points and see.
I would say that a lot of documentaries, flat earth documentaries, especially if they're like in Netflix or somewhere in the mainstream with a lot of views, you know, I would say those are controlled opposition. So either they're controlled debates or they're straight up gatekeepers.
What would make them a controlled? What do you think?
Controlled opposition will be misrepresenting.
No. I'm saying what is motivating them to?
I would say money. Money could be.
Who would be paying them?
I mean, for first, NASA alone. I'm not saying this is the only motive, but one of the motives is money.
One of them would be
NASA alone gets over $70 million a day from our tax money. You know? So they get over $20 billion a year. So they can easily just be lying for money. They don't even have to be in on the lie.
But what would be the motivation behind it? What would that achieve if we
why would they lie to us about the shape of the Earth, right? Yeah, everybody asks that question. So I'm not the one lying, so ultimately I don't know. I can only speculate. So obviously money being one. 2, the dimensions of the Earth are actually unknown. So nobody knows how far the Earth extends. Because we were lied to about the whole heliocentric model. So outer space is actually just a concept. So the distances to the lights and what the lights in the sky actually are, it's made up. So the stars, we can zoom into them with an optical zoom camera and show that they're actually in our visible space, which is, if you ask me, way under 1,000 miles. You know, so they're literally close to the sky, you know, the stars. But what are they and how far they actually are, I don't know. You know, but so we would like to not just about the shape of the Earth, but the whole outer space concept, basically.
I see, but I still don't understand what's when we believe this. What changes?
So it's again. I was getting to that. My bad.
Right.
So another reason is to hide a creator, basically. That this. I'm not religious myself. I think all religions are there to control, but the heliocentric model is the number one religion.
What religion do you believe in?
None. I go with my religion is reality, physics.
Who are the people that explain reality to you the best?
Nobody has to explain reality to me. It just takes my common sense and understanding what I'm observing.
You rely on your own.
My own intuition and my own common sense. And my own, But yeah, so basically, what do all religions have in common? A creation story, and they all tell you what you're supposed to do and what your place is here. The heliocentric model does that with the Big Bang theory, the theory of evolution. So it's just a religion. Nobody knows how this place came to be. That's the fact.
Right.
So anybody claiming to know what this place came to be, you're chasing your tail already. You know, the fact is nobody knows. So I think exploring the Earth, how far it extends, could give us a clue, especially at the north. If there's a magnetic, pull in the north, that has to do with electromagnetism, then there's something in the north, you know, that we don't know. And I don't know if you knew, but the north is actually very restricted. So there's no independent exploration allowed.
As in who can access it?
Exactly. Right. Over, I don't know if you heard.
If I take a picture?
Sure, take a picture of all this. Actually, I have a channel too, because this information is being censored. It's just one of the reasons why I come out here and do this. Because I came across this in 2016, but in 2018, 2019, they started misrepresenting and basically censoring it by ridiculing and dismissing. So nobody's actually debunking this because you can't debunk it. So they're just ridiculing, dismissing, and misrepresenting, and that's how it's being censored. So my channel's the first one on
Can I
there.
take this?
Yeah, you can take that. Yeah, actually, I think I still have one more. If you want to read this before you know.
Absolutely.
It's a flyer, and these are the 6 main proofs that debunk the globe. Water being number 1. But yeah, here you go. This is my last one. I mean, do you have any questions before you go?
I'm honestly curious.
Okay, that's good. Most people are not.
Like I told you, I try to look at it from both points.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think there's one version of the truth.
Yeah.
Very complicated.
There's one side of the story, and there's the other side of the story, but then there's the truth, and that's what physics will be, in my opinion. You know.
Okay. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Thanks for the chat. All right. I'm gonna start wrapping it up. Luckily my action camera didn't die, so that's good. So I got that whole conversation. So we'll see if I upload them. Yeah. Alright. I'm gonna start packing up a little bit. Yeah, the upside down question, man. Damn. I've been trying. I might try to figure out a way to simplify it. Like I have to. Like it needs to be like. Do I need to add a background to it? Like, but then that's gonna make it too easy. It's not gonna. You know, if I add like, you know, if you could see my room in the back, or you know, the room in the thing, it's gonna be too easy. You know, I don't know. Fuck. Can't make it too easy either, because then people are not gonna think. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, man. I just gotta fine tune it, if anything.
See you later.
Oof. Oh my god. By the way, if anybody has any questions about, you know, anything that's, you know, related to the Earth and flat Earth, or the Earth being in motion, or Earth being motionless, if you have proof of the motionless Earth or practical demonstrations, you know, you can leave them in the comments in the video, and I'll address them in the next live. So if anybody has any points or any videos that you would like to share to try and prove, you know, the motionless Earth, or anything for that matter, any topic, yeah, you think it's interesting, that has to do with truth, leave it in the comments, and again, I'll go over it in the next live. So yeah, start packing up here. Yeah, the presentation earlier was kind of a mess, man. I don't know what happened, because I had all the documents already ready where they were gonna pop up on the screen, and I already had them all selected and all basically in a folder ready. And when I went back in right now to, you know, to do the presentation on it, the files didn't exist anymore. So I had to like search for them again and replace them where I put them and resize them and stuff. So it was kind of a mess, but hopefully I got my point across with the high tide and low tide thing. I am going to be addressing it in the future as well, so that was just kind of like a rough draft, or a rough, you know, presentation of it, but yeah, hopefully you guys got the gist of it.
that shit though. When you start to dancing, you have to do it. I don't know what.
That's what you call recruitment right there. The colleges are recruiting right now, huh? All the high school students are trying to bribe, like, oh, this is the campus and everything. I'm actually just packing up. You want to take a card?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty sure you heard about this topic, but to be honest, it's it's something that I won't be able to get, you know, or convince you, or not convince you, but get you to understand right away. So it's good for you to take this information. Awesome. Because thank you to my channel, first one. Are you on the channel? Yeah, levelheaded William.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you should.
Thank you much.
All right. We'll see how we go. All right, that's gonna have to be it. I'm just gonna call it. All right, thanks again for everybody that tuned in. Thanks to everybody that shares the videos and likes it. See you guys on the next one.